I know somebody is saying they live in Katy, and is there anything close to them? So I know we're not supposed to give advice, but I'm just going to give you my advice and a disclaimer that you can throw it out if you don't like it. But I one of the things I was reflecting on is ever since college, I've wanted to do psychedelics. And I've never done it because I wanted to, I understand the whole concept of set and setting and purity of drug and all that kind of stuff, that it's all so influential because your psyche is so open, you're so vulnerable. And so I've waited all these years, I'm 72 now, I've waited 50 years for a situation where I felt safe, and this was it. And a big factor in that was Julie herself. She's had near-death experiences. She's had, of course, ketamine experiences, and she's facilitated, I think she said, over 1,000 sessions,
2,000. Yeah.
over 2,000 sessions. So she's experienced, but it's her person. She's just a very natural therapist, and really just, I think I use the word masterful, and I've really found her that way. And I went all the way from Louisville down to Austin, took the bus, to and stayed overnight and all that, so that, because I didn't have anybody to any way to get, drive me back home. So I had a friend pick me up and take me to my hotel, so I could, get back to normal. And so it was an expense, but I would highly recommend, if you live in the Houston area, just go to Austin, go to Julie, somebody there that because as Dave said, this is very unregulated. You don't know who you're going to get, how, what their philosophy is, how really attuned they are to the stuff that can happen in these sessions and so forth. And so that's my suggestion. And I think her company is called Elemental Health.
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat real quick just to give
Right.
people a sense.
That'd be great if people want to pursue that. And otherwise, I can't make any suggestions about who to go to, except to, it just is so helpful if you can talk with the person ahead of time and get a sense of whether you just really trust them at a deep gut, heart level, to be with you in this very special, under these very special circumstances. So, yeah, so that's, I don't know. Did you want to say anything else about that, Dave, about going to somebody for?
Yeah, I think and she's really intuitive too. I think it's finding a therapist you feel really, really safe and comfortable with. And hopefully there's others in Houston and in Dallas area, but it's still kind of a nascent field, and where Jan and I are not experts in this by any stretch, as far as knowing the field of folks that are out there that could help.
Right. I do know one of my students did some research about availability, and ketamine therapy is quite available throughout Texas. So there are places, but Julie herself says the place she worked at before the place she's working now, she now refers to as a ketamine mill, because they would bring people in small groups, infuse them all with ketamine, and leave them for an hour. And then after it was over, they would, cart them out. And she said people would walk in and they'd leave in wheelchairs, and people were throwing up, and there was just not and people just don't throw up with her anymore, because she knows how to regulate the amount of ketamine so that you're never nauseous or anything, or if you are, you tell her, and then she dials it down. And as Dave indicated, this ketamine metabolizes really quickly. So within, 30 seconds, you're going to a change in the ketamine will affect a change in you. So it's very fast acting. And in terms of somebody is asking about, it's not legal. Well, that's not exactly right. It is legal. It's a Schedule III drug, and which means that you need to have a prescription. And the way you get a prescription is to have a diagnosis. Now, what I indicated when I filled out Julie's paperwork was that I had chronic pain in my back, which was true at the time. It's kind of interesting. In my entire life, I've never had chronic pain. And in the couple of weeks leading up to completing the paperwork for Julie, I had chronic pain where I was having trouble like bending over and putting my socks on and stuff like that. So I was able to truthfully check chronic pain. And after that first session, one of the after effects I had was my back was so relaxed. I had no idea how much tension I carried in my back normally. And it was just in this state of absolute relaxed bliss. So you do have to have some kind of diagnosis that makes it legal. It isn't legal to do for just personal growth, even though that was my actual motive. But Julie said that when she does intakes, she said it's hard to find somebody who doesn't have some unresolved trauma or grief or something in their background that she can diagnose and then do the ketamine therapy. So if you have any sense of any anxiety or depression or chronic pain or addiction issue or anything like that, that can be diagnosed, and then you're good to go for the ketamine treatment. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Dave?
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I was just typing out another answer too.
Okay.
So, some great questions coming in as well. So, I did put the information in for Julie, just for people that want to explore that option with her.
Great. Yeah. So we've got a couple of questions from Pam. Hi, Pam. I know one of your questions was about, has it been used with people who've had near-death experiences? And that's actually one of the studies that Julie and I are planning. What we're planning right now is a study of people who are, for the very most part, mentally healthy, and see the frequency with which they report experiences that register as near-death experiences on the NDE scale, and then what after effects there are, to see if, because a big question in the field of near-death studies is people learn about NDEs and sometimes they think or say, I'd like to have one of those, but I don't want to die to have it. And so Julie says that now probably 1 in 3 of her patients has a near-death-like experience, like
Wow.
Dave had. So we want to really put that to the test and see exactly what ketamine protocol is facilitating that experience, and then see if it has. And so the question is, can people have the experience, fairly reliably under ketamine? You can never guarantee that anything's going to happen, but, fairly reliably. And does the experience actually register as an NDE on the NDE scale? And then the big question of, is it just the experience, or does it actually have the after effects that NDEs have? Do people feel more equanimity, less fear of death, and things like that? So more compassion and, those sorts of things. So we're in the process of setting that study up. And if any of you are interested in participating in the study, keep your eyes open, because we'll probably announce it through IANDS if you're a member, or if you just check the IANDS homepage and look under research. As soon as we get the study all set up, we'll put the word out. And I'll forewarn you that as far as we know, you would have to pay for everything just like a normal person. It just that you'd be able to contribute to the study. And then Pam is also asking about people who are aging and losing earlier skill sets. It might add a lot of purpose to their lives. And that's true. I mean, and Julie is interested in studying so many aspects of ketamine because she's seen so many amazing things that it has helped with. But that there isn't literature out there saying that it helps with these things. And so that may be yet another. And people
I'll add to and she asked about Alzheimer's as well. And
yeah.
My father has Alzheimer's, and it would be fascinating to see. He's really towards the end now, so I don't think there's any need to. But I just don't think there's any documentation on it yet. I think I mean one of my friends, his wife's had a head injury from a horse accident, and she still has challenges making connections and some memory issues. And to me, ketamine can be something that's worth a shot. There's no downside. 60 years, people do not die from this. You don't OD on it. It can't hurt, from everything that I've seen in a lot of research. But again, I'm not a doctor. Whatever, under doctor's care, guidance, you listen to that advice absolutely first. But to me, for someone who's willing to do it, it would be something that I would say would be fine to do and try.
Yeah, I agree.
And Julie asked about in states or something where it's psilocybin or LSD is illegal. Ketamine, because it is a Schedule III legal drug and it's allowed for off-label usage. It's I think in most every state there's possibilities for use there. And my guess is for psilocybin and others, which is just cropping up everywhere, there's probably places online you might be able to find it, or meetups or connections somehow. But yeah, there's no directory of it all yet.
Yeah, thanks. Paul is asking, hi, Paul. Do you feel that your beliefs shaped your experience, and how has your experience shaped your beliefs? Well, I'll take a shot first, and then I'll ask Dave too.
Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. I don't think that my conscious beliefs shaped my experience because, as I said, it is impossible to intend anything to happen. I mean, it is an experience of absolute surrender, and it's going to do what it's going to do. I said to Julie more than once, I never could have predicted this. Like, would I ever have thought of being at the base of the Eiffel Tower and shooting up through it? And by the way, I want to show you real quickly. When I was telling Dave about this, he found this illustration from Heart Math. Can y'all see that? And it shows that energy field, showering down around the person, recoalescing, and like that. And it just really captured the feel. And the lattice work in that illustration is kind of reminiscent of the lattice work of the Eiffel Tower. So it just really resonated with me. So I do believe that my unconscious, that what ketamine did was it amplified what was in my unconscious. But because it was unconscious, I had no idea what was going to happen. So I don't think that, I mean, it is hard to explain unless I could not have imagined what it was like to do ketamine. As I kept saying to Julie the first time, especially, there's nothing like this. And so I don't think that my conscious beliefs did. I think my unconscious mind definitely influenced. Now, reversing, how has it influenced my beliefs? It's confirmed for me the belief that that there's healing value in doing psychedelics. And it's, as I said, created for me I would call it not a belief, but a knowing that death is not frightening, that not being this identity is perfectly good. And so it definitely has had an influence on my beliefs. Yeah. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, as far as belief shaping the experience, I would say both, that it could be some unconscious data that occurred, but I felt like I experienced stuff that there's no way that it came out of anything that happened from life experience or beliefs shaping the experience at all. And so there, maybe elements of things I've touched or seen along the way. I don't recall like any direct connections to it, so I'm very open to that possibility. Like, to me, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, so there's nothing to prove it. But the experiences of ancientness, of unity, of infinity, and seeing expanses that are just beyond your brain's capacity to process, and then sort of the healing things that happened to me were not something that I just think could come out of even my personal unconscious, and tapping into the greater unconscious, but that's what you're tapping into, is a larger field of awareness or consciousness. And then as far as my beliefs, I think it validated many from the spiritual side on being, feeling a sense of oneness and feeling and seeing that tangibly. So that was nice to get a true taste of that, and then bringing that back to one's daily life was really powerful too. So you can remember the power of the experience, don't have to go back to it and realize that you're here to experience everything. So it just helps cement that maybe as something that was very tangible and physical for me.
I'm getting a sense of needing to say something. Julie had told me about a case. She told me about several of her cases, but one of them was a woman who had chronic abdominal distress. And she'd, been to all these doctors and all these treatments, and nothing got rid of it. And Julie said, so she was, like, okay, I'll try ketamine. And so Julie said in the first session, she turned on the pump and the woman leapt out of the chair and went and crouched in the corner. And she was reliving an experience of being sexually molested before she was verbal.
Wow.
And so she was, and that's why I say, it's Julie, like, it's so good to have somebody like her who knows what to do in situation like that kind of situation. So she, stayed with the person and helped them process through the experience. And Julie said the next week, the woman came back and she was free of abdominal distress, and she has remained free of it. So all those years, and it's a known thing in the trauma literature that sexual molestation can manifest as chronic abdominal problems. But it wasn't anything that she or the patient anticipated would happen. It was only after the fact that it made sense. Because again, this was just deeply buried in the patient's unconscious. So I think it's important to say that, again, you never know what's going to come up. And there can be things in the unconscious that are going to be, challenging to work through. But the good news is that you work through it and get to the other side and have relief and healing and that sort of thing. So it's all good eventually, but not necessarily pleasant in the process for everybody all the time.
Yeah, and at least under ketamine, your ego is out of the way, so it allows it to come up in a safe, healing way. I would say, where I would hope she would have felt protected or held going through that, but it could
Absolutely.
still be, yeah, traumatic stuff that might come up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Mandy is saying, I believe UTSW in Dallas also does ketamine therapy. So I don't know anything about that, but that's a good lead for somebody who's looking for that in this in the Dallas area. And we're getting a thanks for the interesting discussion. Let's see, is there anything else you can think of, Dave, that you want to say before we close for tonight? And we don't have to close fast. I'm just saying,
Yeah, no problem. I think
if
it's
we run out of stuff to say and we run out of questions, we can stop.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating era we're in, and to me, it's I've always been kind of driven to understand the nature of reality, and this is one aspect which opens up. I think from a scientific perspective, when you look at quantum theory and the separation between sort of quantum world and non-locality to the physical world, and how stuff creates into physical reality, and yet they're connected somehow, and it feels like to me in some level, and I'm not a quantum theorist, but there's some connection there from a spiritual angle. You can take it from that. I mean, your words sounded like Zen, right? And on nothing and everything and emptiness, and there's a bit of that. And if you're Christian, you'll probably, people can, from whatever faith, would bring their own experiences in, but it's I think a great era of experimentation. The world needs to be careful with it, but the help that this type of therapy can bring, to me, is infinitely available if we can find the right way to roll it out to more people.
Yeah.
Jan,
Go ahead, Pete.
I wrote down 3 questions, and you've touched on a couple of them, but I wanted to ask you to think on these a little bit. The first is, after Dave contacted you and told you about his experience, you then decided to go to Austin and try this. I wanted to hear you walk through that thought process from, okay, I've heard from Dave and now I'm going. So what happened in that intervening time in your mind? How did that play?
What were you thinking?
What was I
What were you thinking?
Yeah. Well, actually, an important thing that happened was when Dave said, I think my therapist, Julie, would probably like to talk with you. And so then Julie and I Zoomed. And once I had, and I was just, like she might, like, I didn't know at the time that she had a near-death experience. And so I thought maybe she'd like to know, like about how near-death experiences and Dave's and, but we just had this wonderful conversation where she was telling me about her training and her experiences, and just interacting with her, I felt so safe. And so I just and so it, like I said, I've had this latent desire all these years, and it just kind of all bubbled up like, oh, okay, I could do this. I could go to Austin and have this experience. And the setting is going to be good because I trust Julie. I know she's going to have good, pure ketamine, not like stuff you get off the street. You don't know, what is this laced with? And my mindset was good because I felt so safe and trusting and open. And so that, I think that's it, that my latent desire came, full circle with what was happening right in front of me, and it was like, okay, this is the time.
Well, then, the other question along that line, maybe not on that line, but you're talking with Julie. You came to decide this I could work with this person. And could you tell a little bit more about what makes her good for this, and also what is her licensure that allows her to prescribe a schedule-free drug?
Yeah. She's a licensed practical nurse. So
Okay.
she, that's the auspices under which she can offer ketamine therapy. And she's in a practice where she has a consulting physician, and she actually is the director of clinical services for a national ketamine treatment
Body.
It's a business, yeah, and they do naturopathic other treatments as well, but Forum Health, I think, and yeah.
So so those are her you know, professional qualifications, but you know, what makes her a good therapist? That's such a great question. I'm a counselor educator, and that's a big question in the field of counselor education. There's been so much research about what constitutes a good therapist, and in the end, they end up just saying there's an it factor, and you've either got it or you don't, as a therapist. And she's just got it. I mean, she's just very insightful, and some of the things that she would say in response to what I was saying, it's like she was in my head, and she just completely empathized with me. She just understood, and expanded on. She would say, this reminds me of this, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a really good point, and that connects to this. And so it was just a really and as Dave said, she's very intuitive, and I think it's partly because of her near-death experience, as well as her experiences doing ketamine herself, and she knows the territory.
I'll just add to that, she's had 2 near-death experiences. Wild. I mean, and then the 2 I's that I think of are integrity and intuition. So integrity matters in this business, and she's that. I mean, in any discussion with a therapist, you want someone with that integrity, pure intentions, and she is absolutely there to try to help people, heal people, in it for the right reasons. And then her intuition is incredible. So yeah, in dealing with me, and I ask a ton of questions, right? And she goes, okay, you're going to want to know the dosage. You're going to want to know this. And I was like, yes, I do. And so she's great, and a sense of humor to boot. So I think that just, it creates a good vibe, which is why I felt comfortable. Also, as Jen got curious about it.
Well, and then for both of you, especially, well, maybe prior to each session, but prior to the first session, for sure, I'm sure there's a lot of preparatory talk that you're gonna have. And can you go through a little bit of what that entails?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I'll jump in first. It's not talk therapy. So there's a discussion on, why are you doing this? What are you trying to work on? Is this, Julie will screen you. Are you a realistic candidate for this or not? So I felt it was more about the screening. I was actually, and that, in, I don't know, 30 minutes, it wasn't that long. And then in the actual session, which I was, you're a little anxious going in, what is this going to be like? And there was not talk therapy during the session more than checking in. And I really appreciated that, because I felt some of this stuff and the experience is beyond words. And talk therapy is wonderful, right? There's certain things that really help to talk through, but getting out of your head and into an embodiment of, and in this space was much more conducive for the type of experience that ketamine can bring. That's healing, it's sense of oneness, it's bigger perspective of the universe, and all the things that go with it. What would you add, Jan?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm focusing right this moment on how you mentioned this, Dave, but frequently Julie would touch my hand, and kind of hold my hand a little like this. The arm that was getting the ketamine, is where she was sitting, and just that kind of thing. Like, she's very nurturing and without being intrusive. So there wasn't, to get back to your question, Pete, there wasn't much more than, as Dave said, the screening and making sure that I knew what was going to happen. First you'll come in, you'll sit down, we'll get you hooked up. We'll put on the mask and make sure everything's comfortable, and you can have water if you want it. You'll be able to talk to me. And she just tries to let you know as much as she can about what to expect. But then, the big part is that you just can't imagine what it's like until you experience it. And so, yeah.
When I came in too, I thought I was going to be dealing with, I know what the issues I had to deal with. I've got stuff from work, I've got this other stuff in my life, and none of that stuff mattered at all. I mean, it does not matter. And that's part of coming back. You realize all this stuff is just, stuff happens, right? And you go through life. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's great, sometimes, and that it was funny to look back and say, this is nothing like I thought I was going in for. A great question from Janet too, on the sense of interacting with the light that you saw. And because I thought about that too, like I didn't get pulled into it. It was sort of in the background, shining and holding and allowing the healing to happen. And it didn't get closer to it, where from an NDE perspective, on real NDEs, where people might go through a void, which ketamine can do, and avoid, but might bring you to a barrier or something you cross, and are you going to stay there and leave your body, or are you going to come back? There was nothing like that. So I felt I never got pulled in that far, and that's the way it was meant to roll. And it sort of set up the space I was in. I don't know why the light needed to be there. It didn't have to be, but it was. That was so it felt a little more sacred than a normal experience. But it was this, well, that's just the way it is. It was just like, this is reality. This is the universe doing its thing. And so there was a specialness to it for sure. But I kind of like that. It wasn't like, I saw heaven, and it was, it was like the way things are supposed to be, and that was humbling and special for me, but also sort of just the nature of the way this mysterious reality works. I have no better answer than that.
Dave, right around the time you were talking about the pinpoint of light, you said just one statement about a sense of the presence of another being. Is there more to say about that?
Yeah, there was the night character, which I looked up afterwards, and sometimes that could be an archetypal thing for protection. Maybe was it some actual being? I have no idea. There was another kind of Egyptian face that I saw. I didn't know if that was, I could project onto it. Is that a healer? I don't know. Was that energy getting pulled? I don't know. So that was a surprise too. Like, there didn't need to be anybody there. But it was somewhat comforting. So maybe that's why. I mean, when people have NDEs and they see family members, That's a different experience for sure. I don't run around with knights in my background. I mean, as a kid, maybe, but it's interesting. Maybe it came out of archetypal stuff within me. I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of shy. That was the only experience of beings in any of my 7 sessions. And I did have session number 4 after, was not a great session. There was also, it was at a different office than Julie's in now, and there was some noise outside which interrupted, and not every session is this perfect, amazing experience. That's why doing several of them, I think, is smart, at least 2 to 3. And so there were still always moments that were wonderful, but they vary. Mileage will vary.
Yeah. So Pete, anything else?
Well, those are all the questions that I wrote down as we were talking, and I see that we only have someone who says you're welcome. So that's Mike again from Katie. So I don't think we have any more questions. If there are any more insights or last comments either of you'd like to make, though, probably a good time to do that.
Another thing that just bubbled up for me is being aware that in the first session, Julie said a lot of the phrase, "You're safe," and that's normal. So I would report something to her that was like, whoa, and she would say, "That's normal." And it's like, oh, okay. And if she ever sensed that I was feeling unsafe in some way, she would just say, "You're safe." And I noticed that in the second session, she only said that once or twice. In the third session, she didn't say it at all because I didn't need it. And that's another indication of her intuitiveness and her clinical sensitivity of responding at the level that the person needs. So that was cool. And then another thing I've just realized, I'm kind of jumping around here, but I want to share my screen. After the second one, my Eiffel Tower experience, I realized this past spring, I taught the transpersonal perspective in counseling course at UNT. And in one of the courses, I gave a lecture about how quantum concepts are misused in attempts to understand psychic phenomena. And I, without going into a lot of the details, I used in that lecture this diagram, which I got off of Wikipedia, about a proton and how protons either have upspin or downspin, and this is upspin, where the energy goes like this. And when I had my Eiffel Tower experience, it reminded me of this diagram, except downspin, because I was going actually like this, and in this direction. And but what I realized in the experience is that my lecture had been all about how, what really is happening in quantum physics does not explain psychic phenomena. But what I experienced in my ketamine experience was that there is a connection between the quantum and the mystical, that what I was experiencing was something mystical and quantum at the same time. And so it was beyond anything rational that I could have understood. So it was kind of like I had to laugh at myself for having given that lecture and implied that there's no connection between the quantum and the mystical, when in my ketamine experience, I experienced that there absolutely was. So that was kind of a neat insight.
Very good.
Yeah.
There's a great question, a couple more, Daniel and Deborah. Daniel asked about Julie and her ketamine experience as compared to her NDEs. And I didn't ask her for a comparison unless you did, Jan, but she did say, I go, have you done ketamine, since? And she goes, no, I've had my NDEs. I don't need to do ketamine more either. And, continue. She might have, done them one or two. I don't think she did a big series of ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good question. So next time we see Julie, we should ask her about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm Zooming with her on Friday. I'll have to try and remember to ask her that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Deborah asked about sight, or heightened senses like sound, light, and smell. And I wonder if, colors were, they changed. Like there was black void, and then there was jungle and imagery of the planet and other things. I did see another session. I did see sort of galaxies, like literally little galaxies. And I don't think I was seeing actual galaxies, but it was so massive. It was, again, that sense of humbleness on seeing how big and massive and enormous and ancient everything was. The light and the smells, there was no smells. I think for me under ketamine, it felt, and I don't know if it's because it is a drug, right? It's manufactured. So there was a sense of not, I don't know if it was the void, but if there was a pure vacuum feel to it. And it's almost like, is it the quantum field? I don't know what to call it, right? Is the quantum field incredibly pure? It felt like vacuum pure, like nothing else there. So you're kind of floating down these, sometimes you see spaces or like the rooms or buildings, sometimes it's just void and flow. And I did see geometric tiles at one point that were very structured in a way, like a cliff wall or something, just went on forever. But everything was enhanced a little bit, but it wouldn't, I don't know, Janet, I wouldn't say everything was enhanced in that space. It just feels different. And some, like I mentioned, sometimes my breath felt like I was breathing out of a regulator. It might have been the ketamine doing that too. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree that, well, first of all, because it's an experience of disconnection from the physical body, the ketamine experience that for me was predominantly visual. And the only soundish thing that I had was that, but it wasn't a normal sound. It was this energetic, like an electrical buzz, except it wasn't a buzz. It was electrical, and it was like an energetic wah wah kind of thing. And no smells at all. So, and whether my vision was heightened, I don't know that I can say that, but I mean, being immersed in this pastel purple blue was just so exquisite. And at one point, I was that color. And so even to talk about that as a heightened visual experience just doesn't kind of resonate. It's just really hard to explain. Except I wouldn't have said myself that my senses were heightened. It's more, there's a perceptual intensity there. But in what I called in the third session, when I was starting to go, I said, here we are again in ketamine land. And Julie laughed because there's a definite distinctive quality to that experience, even with all the variation of phenomena that can happen in it. Yeah. And then how do you get used to having NDE? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. You could rephrase it, Mandy, if to clarify. I don't think you get used to it. Just from my limited NDE like experience, it was incredibly powerful. So, like I think many true NDE, people who have died and come back, it does change your perspective on the world and reality. Just feeling a sense of groundedness and connection, and not afraid of death per se. If I'm about to get hit by a truck or shot or something, I will be very scared, right? I mean, that doesn't take any of your human frailty away, but the idea of dying doesn't scare me at all.
Yeah. And Daniel is asking what motivated Julie to move into this area. So my understanding, and if you have anything to add or correct about this, from what Julie told me, was she is a licensed practical nurse, and she was specializing in sleep disorders. So ketamine became an approved treatment for sleep disorders. So she took a job with this company that did ketamine therapy, and in that process worked with patients who not only had sleep disorders, but had other, all the other kinds of things that people seek ketamine treatment for. And that's the one that she then later looked back on as the ketamine mill, because they would take the people in, just give them a high dose, leave them alone for an hour, and then cart them out, and no processing. And she realized what happened was, at the end of the day, when she wasn't having to, turn the patients over, and she could linger with patients, that when they would talk, that seemed to really be helpful to the patients. So that's when she looked for a job with another company where talk was built into, processing the experience was built into the model, the clinical model. So the sessions that she now does are 2 hours. And as Dave said, about 10 minutes getting set up, then 30 minutes of ketamine, and then a little over an hour to process what all happened. And it takes that long to really kind of get the ketamine processed out of your system enough that you can, walk and that sort of thing. Yeah. So that was her motivation, is originally a sleep disorder specialist.
Mandy, thanks for following up. And I'm sorry to hear that too. And I am aware, just from reading and a lot on the subject too, that true NDEs are not all blissful experiences by any stretch. And that you've had several of them is, that's a lot to deal with. So that I don't, Jan may have an answer. I think, just by you being here and reaching out to other people that have had NDEs, and maybe some that have had traumatic NDEs, might be something. I mean, yes, therapy for sure. I mean, do you try ketamine or something? You could, because the odds of having NDE, I think, are probably low, and you could still have a positive experience that might help allay some of that. That's really up to you, but I would keep talking to people, and really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. I will just add on to that, trauma is when something happens that is overwhelming to my capacity to cope. And so the experience can get kind of stuck psychologically. And so the way to deal with that is to process and unstick the psychological whatever is there. And people have found relief through eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. It could be helpful to do ketamine, especially with a therapist like Julie, who's had her own near-death experiences, and would be able to help facilitate that working through, and that there absolutely can be relief that's hard to foresee when you're under the effects of the trauma, but that makes sense once the working through happens, and you can look back and go, oh, that's what was happening. And so I would just encourage, to keep talking and reaching out and finding ways to process what you've experienced. Yeah. So several aspects seem similar to hypnotherapy and regression therapy. Each is a unique, custom designed for the most healing. Yeah, well, I agree, Daniel. Hi, Daniel. I really agree that there are a lot of ways to get to the unconscious. And hypnotherapy, guided imagery, because I've done past life therapy training with two different approaches, one that used hypnosis and one that used just guided imagery. They both were equally effective. And then there's like ketamine. I think doing dream work therapy can sometimes release this kind of stuff. So there are a lot of ways, and the keys have to do with knowing that whatever you're using, hypnosis, ketamine, whatever, all it's doing is getting the ego out of the way so that unconscious material can come forth and be brought into the light of day. And so knowing that means everybody's experience is going to be unique, and yet there is a kind of a process that happens that you see over and over. I think there is a lot of similarity in just different approaches to working with unconscious material. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad, Mandy. Yeah. So it's 9:00. So it's about time for us to end. Anybody have any final anything you want to say? Okay. Well, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Dave. This has just been loads of fun for me. I hope for you too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the community that you guys have created is just fantastic. So thanks for having me. Trust me, I never thought I'd be doing this.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Great. And just a little advertisement real quick that the IANDS conference is coming up on Labor Day. So if you are interested in, presentations and talks and panels and all that kind of stuff, you can attend either in person, which is, of course, the way I highly recommend. Pete and I are both going to be there. And but if you can't go in person, you can attend virtually and at least see many of the presentations. And anybody who registers either to go in person or virtual gets somewhere between 90 and 180 days of access to all the conference recordings to watch at your own convenience. So it isn't just at that weekend. So go to conference.iands.org and check it out. See if there's something there that you might want to be sure and take advantage of.